Hello. We'll have a hard time after I know basically talk everything away what we're going to talk about, but we'll try anyway. We'll give you the longer, more elaborate version of what Aino just said. So, as you know by now, we both work at Upvest, which is a B2B company, so we offer a REST API to investments. And we started from scratch. We had a completely greenfield project with all the right ideas. You can think of us as the Stripe for investment solutions. So we package everything that's involved in long-term investment into a single product and offer that to B2B customers. We're the company behind, for example, N26 investment product. And Lutz will start guiding you through how it all started and how we set out.
Yeah, I will. So, okay, can you give me the thingy? Yeah. How did it start? So it started in about 2020, and let's quickly talk about well, you're also interested in kind of strategy. You went to the Wortley Maps talk, right? So in disruption and in sort of outside forces. So just to give a bit of context, what were the outside forces that led to us building this investment API? It was, well, some people discovered there were a bunch of people in the crypto space, our bosses, our founders, and they learned about the business opportunity retail investment, right? Which is investment by people like you and me, as opposed to institutions. And well, some people predict it's a huge market and a growing market, and it will be, as you can see, 21 trillion in a couple of years. And the theory is that to leverage this market, or the sort of the players that are going to get the sort of major share of the market, they have to offer certain properties. There's accessibility. That means make it easy to invest for people, especially don't have any sort of high financial hurdles, allow very small investments, like I just want to invest 10 euros every month in shares, so I don't want to buy even the whole share, but just like 10 euros of Apple. We need to enable this. A typical use case will be not trading, as you know, traditionally maybe, in the past, you know, stock market was about a lot of sort of short-term revenues with smart trading. Now, a lot of people invest in ETFs and are in it for the long run, right? They have it as a pension fund or for their retirement. So this long-term wealth building is a use case we need to serve. And also people are very picky about how they want to invest their money. Maybe there are some companies or some companies from certain countries you don't want in your portfolio because of your convictions or your sort of political positions, or because you don't want to invest in war machinery or in companies that are not sustainable or whatever. So people want very personalized portfolios and want to be able to invest in this. So this is the whole idea, to offer this. Why do banks not offer this? Because they run on fax machines, on COBOL programs, right? It's also very old school, and they really have a hard time offering a good, easy integration experience. Or we just offer a REST API that people can use to do all this stuff. And yeah, traditional banks have a hard time doing this. So this is the business part. Now, how do we build this? So it was literally greenfield, 0 lines of code. And we figured we have to build a bank to do this. Like not something you do every day, right? And of course we want to do it right. We don't want to create a big ball of mud because we're smart people. And some of the people that started this have worked at other companies before. They have gone through this experience as well, right? Maybe they built at TransferWise or so, they already built a big ball of mud and went through the whole exercise of splitting it up and making it more scalable and making the organization more scalable. So we really wanted to start with the right mindset and the right principles. So one of this is product thinking, right? Also a big idea in domain-driven design, that we think in the language of the business and that the developers become domain experts. This was really important to us. Alberto Bandolini, the event storming guy, he has this thing that I really love where he says, software development is a learning process, working code is a side effect. Right? I think this is really about it. You want good developers, and they need to learn about the domain, and then they will solve the business problems and create great code. So this is one of the kind of starting principles, product thinking. Actually, our engineers are called product engineers, as it says on the slide, which is also to express this. And then, of course, Yeah, not a big ball of mud. This is like very, very early days, before the first line of code was written, is a slide from a 2020 presentation about the subdomains in our domain. And this is also how we shape the teams, right? So we started with a very domain-driven approach, and we build our teams and services around these. This was an interesting find. So as we prepared this presentation, we dug up this old slide, and if you look at our system now, actually not everything ended up exactly as it was supposed to be on this slide. For the market data stuff is a bit distributed among other domains. But what was really funny was when I looked at this slide, I thought, oh, well, this is actually better. Like, we somehow forgot what we wanted to do initially and did something else, but this was actually a better idea. We should really go back to this. Oh, also a big topic in many talks nowadays is platform engineering, right? And if you're in the sort of organization development, team topologies area, you're probably thinking about, what does platform do? How do I set up what's my platform surface? So this is a bit neglected in this talk. It's not going to be a big topic in this talk. I'm going to say this right away. And you can see it's a bit neglected in the slide as well. We do have a very minimal platform. Well, it's all in the cloud, of course. We do infrastructure as code. And yeah, we have so you might call it a minimal viable platform. But some internal tooling as well, right? When it says internal tooling, yeah, we have some shared tools that we use, and also some shared libraries, but we try to keep that very lean. Architecture. We try to, or in the beginning there were some strong convictions. As I said, people who founded the company, they had gone through the experience of ending up in a big ball of mud and dissecting that. So we started off with microservices from the start, right? We had teams with very strict API contracts. We have an event-driven approach, so all of the internal, well, to the outside world, we offer REST APIs, right? But internally, almost everything is event-driven based on Kafka. So if you look at an architecture diagram from our system, it's actually a bit weird. It's like loads of boxes that are connected to Kafka and nothing else. So that's a pretty simple architecture, but that served us well, right? Some of it seems trivial. Maybe we have a bit more. It's not just these 4. If I'd print it out, it would probably be like 2 or 3 pages. But that's really about it. And that served us well for a long time. Well, we're going to talk about the challenges later. And in addition to that, well, no set of principles and guidelines is going to be all encompassing, I guess, right? There's always going to be points in time where you need to make decisions, where the teams need to make decisions. In the beginning, it was completely, well, there were no architects, there was no architecture board, there was no architecture, no central function, right? If a team had something where they felt, okay, we want to bring this up, we want to discuss this with other teams, they would produce an ADR, and in the end, all the tech leads of the teams would discuss and come to a decision there, right? So architecture without architects, definitely, or well, without explicit architects. Our tech leads, maybe we need to explain our tech leads. These are the team leads, but it's a bit of a hybrid role. So they're also contributors. It's like an ICM role, individual contributor and manager. So they're pretty technical. Yeah, and also them taking the vote doesn't mean they sort of make the decision alone, right? They usually check with their teams, of course. And lastly, or almost lastly, of course, agile process, right? This is just a snippet from a longer description of our process. We call it the secure software development lifecycle. So we have very few principles that the teams need to follow. Like, we expect them to work on continuous improvement, right? To retrospect on their work every once in a while. But even there, they can basically have their own cadence for that. And of course, we have some requirements because we build a bank. We are regulated, right? We're regulated by the BaFin and by the European Central Bank. So that comes with some needs for the software development process, right? It needs to be basically completely traceable and auditable. For everything you deploy, you need to have a whole chain of where does this come from, kind of what commit was this, what feature is this related to, and what functionality does it actually deliver. We try to achieve this with a lot of automation. And that works pretty well. So I think that's a very important learning. Well, we'll come to learnings later, but continuous delivery and automated processes and so on is not a contradiction to being in a regulated environment and having some formalities around your process. So actually these things go pretty well together. Yeah, other than that, I would say it's like a post-Scrum, you could say, agile process. So it's not Scrum, it's like whatever the team wants. We do continuous delivery, we do retros, but other than that, the teams are very free in how they work, right? And the idea of kind of own the outcome. We have a strong sense of ownership in the teams, and we feel that if people are accountable for what they produce, they should also be in charge of the process. Funnily, if you look at the teams, it almost looks the same in every team. Like every team kind of converged towards like a 2-week cycle process. But they didn't have to. Maybe they don't even realize that they don't have to. So that was it. Yeah, or that's how we started. That was it in the sense of how we started. So we had nothing. We wanted to build a bank. So we started with some strong principles, strong engineering principles, right? Like 2 pages of be event-driven, microservices, and so on, with a strong product thinking mindset, and with our sort of secure software development process lifecycle. And then a couple of years in, I think now we're in, let's say, 2022, when we actually joined the company. And at that point, well, at that point, things looked very bright. They still look bright, but at that point, they already looked very bright. That was a time when investment money was very easy, right? That was like 0 interest rate. So on the one hand, VC capital was looking for places to go, right? VCs were looking for places to invest because they could get money cheaply. And also people wanted to invest in shares and stock because just savings accounts also would get you no interest, right? So we expected an enormous growth, and the idea, structure-wise, was to hire from the top. So our CTO hired 7 heads of engineering, and each of us was tasked with sort of building up their tribe, where we already had a couple of people, but we had maybe 40, 45 people. Or I think with these heads of engineering, we were maybe 45. So that's quite a lot of managers for that amount of people. So the idea was to, as I said, to hire from the top. So we would hire the tech leads, and they would hire the teams, and this way we would grow massively, which we did to an extent. But well, let's have a little check 2 years later.
Thank you, Lutz. So we're now in the situation, it's 2022. We have all our banking and investment licenses in place. We have all these foundational principles, strong convictions about domain-driven design and team autonomy, and we have an organizational setup that is built for massive growth. So what could go wrong? We will fast forward to early 2024 and talk about some of the things we learned in that time. So first, the things that kept working well. The foundational part of a product mindset and our company values that are structured around them, like own the outcome. They worked phenomenally well also in growth. At that point, we were now at double the size that we were in 2022, with around 80-ish engineers and a 160 people company. And this product mindset and a very collaborative setup helped us through all the woes where boundaries were not set perfectly, so we needed to wiggle around that. This proved to be a very key asset for the company, and this is something we draw from to this day. The other part that Lutz talked about, having very strong automation in the technological basics, our software delivery process, having that fully automated, it's infrastructure as code, every deployment is a pull request that has 4 eyes approvals, which we can fully trace and audit, say who did which change in deployment, who approved that, how does the change look like. Auditors really like that. They need to understand that, and it requires a bit of explaining, but it is a game changer because it allows you to run a setup like ours, which is under high regulatory demands with a with a low amount of people overhead for these regulatory processes. And the third one, the focus on guiding principles, having short documents, crisp principles, and a few of them, and working through principles and guidelines instead of strict top-down governance. That also worked well because it allowed innovation in teams, it allowed different solutions when they were appropriate for the relevant domains. So these are takeaways we saw that worked well even over 2 years. But it also has downsides. So, as I said, we grew to an 80-people engineering organization with about a dozen of teams. And the guidelines and engineering principles, they were basically 2 pages. It's pretty succinct, short, but it lacked implementation details. So we've seen a bit of difference and variation in how teams interpreted these principles and guidelines, and we saw a bit of technology sprawl. We started on very simple technology baselines. We're a completely Golang shop working on Kafka for eventing, so there's not a lot of variety in technology, but you have some platform services, like how you talk to databases, how you do eventing, transactional patterns. In eventing, you probably want that centralized and platformized. And this came out of the principles in the small company, but over time, teams discovered, okay, they need different interaction patterns, or the performance of what we have is not enough for them. And we didn't have a platform team to cater for that. So we saw forks of basic platform functionality and some drift. And at the same time, we are now in this gigantic growth phase, and we hired a lot of people already. With 7 heads of engineering, which in our context directly mirror the organizational structure in tribes, we work on a quarterly OKR framework for prioritization to have everyone align. And with 7 heads in engineering itself and the other departments of the company, in addition, this becomes a bit difficult. And the time we need to take for alignment and to coordinate high-level company projects over 7 tribes is a bit more involved. So the alignment, you've probably heard about challenges with alignment today already, which was simple at a small size, became involved and sprawling. On the micro level, in the domains, you remember Lutz told you we have teams that own one or multiple domains and are subject matter experts there. We saw very uneven development in these domains. Some of them became very complex very quickly. We have a Texas domain team that deals with all the complexities of the German tax system. And that team at one point was not only owning taxes, but another function called corporate actions, which, if you know anything about investment details, is a big topic by itself, but it's owned by one team. And we had team sizes that were 3 to 5 people, including tech leads. So for some teams, that was a very comfortable size. For others, this was a nightmare. And we ended up in a setup where we had domain contributions. So when people required something from a team, but the team did not have capacity, they would help out in another domain and learn just enough to contribute, which helped us. It's back to the collaborative fashion we work, but it did not solve the fundamental problems of very uneven capacity between teams. But reteaming was expensive to do often because of the learnings into the domain that you needed. So we needed to make some changes to get up to speed or get up to more speed still. Everything was working fine, but you saw the cracks. And we started thinking about architecture there. So the culture of discussion, like bottom-up architecture we had in the first days, we thought that this would still be a sane approach, but it got lost in the growth. We had people very busy delivering features, and there was no support structure for that. So architecture got very reactive and was an afterthought. So we wanted to do that very inclusive and bottom-up, keep the basic process there and work with the system instead of against it. And we established an architecture guild to teach the organization about architecture. When teams are focused in domains, not everyone has full exposure to architecture topics, so you need to democratize the knowledge about architecture, provide a forum to discuss and challenge and also eventually make decisions, and draw out the core principles we want to use in our architecture based on the principles we set out before. And at the same time, also make room for innovation by introducing new technologies or new architectures. The format we chose was bi-weekly meetings in the end, to have some structure and ownership, to have drivers with some capacity. We made our staff engineers who were cross-team and had good enough visibility on challenges across teams so they could use this to organize and drive this whole endeavor. We wanted to adhere to the existing principles and, if needed, change the principles if we saw that we would act against these over time. And we were striving for consensus because teams had a lot of autonomy. When you make fundamental architecture decisions, it usually affects everyone and everyone's delivery timelines, which makes these kinds of architecture decisions tricky, especially in a consensus world. And we found that people brought interesting topics for architecture to this guild, like how to do event handling, different transactional mechanisms in event-driven systems, error handling, challenges that all people faced. This was brought to these organizational guild meetings, architectural guild meetings. But in the end, we had the problem that we were way over capacity with no people having dedicated time around architectural concerns. And it became an uphill battle for people driving topics because they needed to coordinate with the autonomous teams and create enough of buy-in for everyone to do that. So we were running into a situation where everything worked, but we were not making progress in global architecture decisions because there was no capacity and everyone was very busy building product. And then, before we could react again on that, we also faced new realities. The zero interest rate period was over, and some money went away from the investment domains, which was not a huge problem for us in the first place, but it had impact also on our investors, and it delayed our investment timelines quite a bit. So we had to go through almost a year with no growth, which wasn't what we intended and planned for. We had an organizational setup that was hell-bent on growth, and we had a very big structure for that. And now we needed to get through almost 12 months with no growth. We got through all of that by a lot of investor trust, so they were all in for the long game. And while everyone was laying off left and right, we only had to deal with zero growth for a while. But we found we needed to make some adjustments to the organization as it was to continue. And we still believed the organization would continue to grow, so we also would not destroy the core structures that would enable growth in the future. So this is the short domain-driven design, team topologies, value stream mapping part of the talk. We were pretty much in that thinking from the beginning of the company's history. But at this point, we took a look at these principles again and decided how to move forward. So an exercise in value stream mapping and how to reposition the company in this period. Interestingly, the flow engineering book, which talks a lot about very practical approaches to that, just came out when we finished our exercise and had a result. So that was a bit too late, but I'll tell you what we actually did. So we were a startup, quite successful, continuously delivering, and completely restructuring the organization would be very hard in a running system. So we needed to get creative and could not do a full value stream exercise and basically take massive capacity for 3 to 6 months out of the system to run the realignment. So we focused on simple principles to get things back into shape. Make sure that our teams have a sustainable size based on the domains they own, which means putting teams together or drawing domains out of teams, so transferring domains between teams. So that would be sustainable, have more cohesion, so where we saw a lot of collaboration between teams in the past, try to move these domains together, have a narrower structure to have all the management friction and inter-team, inter-tribe collaboration be easier, and isolate domains that were growing fast because we would probably need to split teams, and we saw a lot of growth in complexity. So this is not by the book value stream mapping. This is a very, very simple version of that, which you can apply by simple heuristics, putting all the domains and the teams against the wall and moving things around until you have a good setup that also minimizes moving people around and moving domains around, because that means needs for training and team building. What we notably didn't do in this situation was change the interaction modes. So you can see we reconfigured teams, like moving people around and moving domains around, but we didn't look into changing types of teams. That is a strong thing in team topologies, and platformizing some parts of the infrastructure would probably have been valuable, but would have been very more involved for time's sake. So we sidestepped that in this process, and only saw after we did this change that some teams naturally started platformizing things that had a lot of incoming dependencies. So this last part brings us to almost the present time. In 2025, the company now looks like this. We have 3 tribes with heads of engineering, clearly focused on the main areas of the business. That's brokerage is more the trading and front-end side. Custody is more the post-trading side and what happens after trades have been settled. And the platform part is the underlying facilitator for this development. So this is where we ended up after a doubling of the company with growth pains. We learned a lot in that time, and we had to take some shortcuts, but we're there now. And in last fall, we closed our next Series C, which will allow us to double the company size again, which we are a phase we are in now, and we'll see more growth pains we are somewhat prepared for. And yeah, the fun begins anew. As we say, it's progress over perfection, and we'll face these challenges. And now, Lutz will tell you about the remaining learnings here.
Yeah, well, we're still in kind of where I wanted to get the... Okay. What's the situation today, right? Where are we? And I'm very passionate about architecture. I think good architecture has a strategic value, right? It enables things. Well, you all, I guess, most of you are, because this is an architecture conference as well. And how did we do in terms of architecture management? We said, okay, in the beginning, it was very kind of grassroots, right? Bottom up. The teams would just decide stuff. And we felt, okay, this is okay, but it's kind of lacking the strategic perspective. It became very reactive in the sense of, oh, I have a problem, we need to solve this. Okay, yeah, let's figure this out, let's solve it, and then let the others kind of, maybe you talk to the others and you get some peer review on it, and then you decide to do it. But of course, that's not very forward-looking, right? It's not like, it doesn't really think about where do we want to be in N years, or do we maybe need to evolve our architecture principles and things like this. Then we had this community approach that Florian described, right? Where we said, okay, well, we called it a guild. I guess it was more like a community of practice or so, which was fine. There were some engaging discussions, and we felt that people, at least we had some awareness of this kind of strategic perspective. But it turned out, well, we were still, and I think we're pretty set on that. We don't want architects, right? We don't want, well, definitely not these kind of ivory tower architects that tell people what to do. So in the architecture guild, these were people from the teams that were interested in architecture. Turns out they were all really busy with feature development as well. So we had some nice discussions and some nice ideas, but when it came to actually putting time in, actually driving topics, actually taking things forward, there was just a lack of capacity there, or sort of we really had a hard time prioritizing this more strategic work over feature delivery. And so it really was more a discussion circle and not really driving things forward. So the next idea was, hey, well, we have these kind of staff plus engineers, staff engineers, principal engineers that are supposed to work cross-team anyway, and that are very experienced engineers, and that are sort of natural leaders in the architecture space because they're so looked up to and yeah, because they have all this experience and so on. But that was, so that you could say the idea was to create an enabling team, maybe. Well, I'm saying this with a maybe because it was a really half-baked approach. Right? We basically said, well, we have this virtual team of staff plus engineers, and they are somehow supposed to drive architecture. And then basically every one of them kind of took off with the different projects and maybe individually drove something. But again, in terms of being a bit more strategic and and providing this additional context, it was kind of lacking. I have to say, though, it's not as terrible as I described it. Right? We get by. We have good solutions. We have still good foundations, and also we have good smart engineers. They don't make terrible decisions. It's just, it feels a bit of a missed opportunity, right? In terms of looking ahead. So this slide is a bit more negative than the reality, right? Here it looks like we're completely incompetent and don't even hit the target. What it's supposed to show is that we haven't really hit the bullseye yet, right? But I think our arrows were a bit closer to it than the slide shows. If I ever do this presentation again, I'm going to choose a slightly different slide. So yeah, we're still figuring it out. So where we want to be, I think, and this whole kind of field of autonomy and alignment, I think we've already seen it in a couple of presentations. Of course, the sweet spot is there in the top right corner, right? We want empowered teams. We want them to be autonomous. We want them to make good decisions. Well, we want them to make their own decisions, but also good decisions that are aligned with the company strategy, with the architecture strategy, and so on. In our setup, coming from this kind of grassroots approach, this bottom-up approach, well, we're currently more, we're here, right? I should have put some symbol in here. So we have a lot of autonomy. Alignment, yeah, not so much. So really, we see a bit of divergence there in different solutions and different teams. And it's hard in a way, right? So you also have to remember we're not, I think a lot of people that talk about this, they have the different story, right? We said, we have this story, we come from greenfield, 0 lines of code, all the good ideas. If you come from a more hierarchical organization where they have kind of strong architecture governance, and you say, hey, we're going to take some of this away, we're going to give you more autonomy, we're still going to have this approval board maybe, or some advisory board, you're still expected to kind of share your ideas and get some peer review, but we're giving you more autonomy. I think that lands better than saying, hey, so far you could do whatever you want, and we're going to take away some autonomy because we want more alignment. So this is a tough sell. And yeah, well, we're still selling it. So I think just in the previous presentation I saw, they talked about this, that maybe you have to, where is it again? You have to kind of go down a bit here. So I'd be a bit strict and say, okay, let's focus on alignment first and then kind of bring the autonomy back. Let's see how that works out for us. So this is definitely a fascinating topic and a topic of active discussion also within our management. And now the mouse pointer is back as well. Okay, but no, we don't have the definitive answer there yet. If you have, well, let us know. Team processes, Florian, what do you say about that?
Yeah, so quick wrap-ups. So for the team processes, the guidance and principle-based approach works, and Lutz just shared what the limitations are. So yes, you need to really double down on guidance, provide more context, and be very repetitive about that for this to work out. The platform services approach, for everywhere you need very strong guarantees, have not only a paved road, but a single road that works. A clear limitation of these guidance based processes is measuring across teams becomes very hard because teams are doing slightly different things, which means they use tools in different ways, and this is a limitation we're still figuring out. The domain-driven design is something we really...
that's my slide.
Really?
Oh, it was last time, yeah. Oh, let's see it, yeah. Domain-driven design. So should you slice your teams and services by business capabilities? Yes, absolutely, of course. Like, I think also, probably on this conference, nobody's going to doubt that. Like, being domain-driven, absolutely great. I wouldn't know actually how to do it any other way. And then, well, what you also want is stable teams, right? We talked about this product thinking, and you want the teams to own their product. So you don't want, we don't work in projects where we sort of get a team together to deliver something, and then we sort of rearrange everything after that. No, we want teams, stable teams, really owning their products, and that turned out not to be that easy, right? Because we are. Our scope, the business we're building is still growing, right? As we add capabilities, as we add features, the complexities of the domains explode, right? Like there's a huge difference in Texas complexity depending on what instruments you offer in which markets you serve. Same with corporate actions. What we did initially was not to reteam or not to sort of make those teams bigger, but to work with contributions from other teams, right? So some team that would have some extra capacity would help out the Texas team, say, which works technically because we're all very homogenic there. It's all Golang, as Florian said, and it's all kind of more or less the same architecture. But in terms of kind of long-term ownership and this kind of domain, this kind of own your domain, own your service, that became a bit fuzzy then, and really. Oh, we are running out of time. So yeah, it got a bit diluted, and that there's room for improvement there. We need 2 more minutes.
The one-line summary of that slide is: yes, you can do value stream analysis and team topology elements in a very lightweight way, as we showed, and it's still useful also in a very minimal setup. And don't underestimate the capacity you need for your platforms when you have a highly regulated product.
And don't underestimate the time you need to get through this talk, but as we did. But here, have my mic. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.